Are you ready, true believers? Capcom and Marvel have joined forces once again.
Capcom and Marvel have joined forces once again to bring you Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter! What spectacular action! Don't miss out on the enjoyment of a lifetime! Amazing strategy! Don't miss the most amazing tag team fighting game ever! Are you ready for a new challenger? Victory! Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter!
Excelsior! I'm Joe, this is Same Name Different Game, and there is, if you haven't noticed, a new Avengers movie in theaters. So you know what time it is. We're looking at a comic game. And this time out, we are looking at Capcom's second full-blown crossover with Marvel. Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter. So let's not dawdle and dive right in with a little history. I've touched on this before, but Capcom's relationship with Marvel goes back some time. Capcom's first game based on a Marvel character was 1993's The Punisher, and a short time later, in 1994, X-Men Children of the Atom was released. While The Punisher was a belt-scrolling beat-em-up, Children of the Atom took the form of what Capcom had become best known for by the mid-90s, a fighting game. Sources from the time state that Children of the Atom did very well for Capcom, though I wasn't able to track down exact earnings figures. Naturally, this led to ports and a sequel, Marvel Superheroes. Moving away from just Charles Xavier's mutants, Superheroes added characters like Spider-Man and Captain America to the roster, while also tying in what was at the time a fairly recent comic story, the Infinity Gauntlet, with the Mad Titan Thanos serving as final boss. Their next Marvel fighter would be the start of a long and fruitful series for Capcom, the Versus series, kicked off with X-Men vs. Street Fighter, and on the back of that success, today's game, Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter. Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter hit arcades back in 1997 on Capcom's CPS2 arcade hardware. This game does not call back to any specific Infinity War stories like Marvel Superheroes did, but it does feature many of the same characters, including some you'll see in Avengers Endgame. On the Marvel side of the roster, we have Captain America, Spider-Man, the Incredible Hulk, Wolverine, Cyclops, Omega Red, Shuma Gorath, and Blackheart. The Street Fighter side brings us Ryu, Ken, Chun-Li, Sakura, M. Bison, Dhalsim, Zangief, Dan, and Akuma. And on the, neither side, it's Norimaro. I guess this is as good a time as any to mention that the first game we're looking at this month is for the Sega Saturn. Why? Well, because it's arcade perfect. It was released only in Japan on October 22nd, 1998, both because it requires the Saturn's 4 meg RAM expansion, which wasn't sold in the US, and because this was over a year after Bernie Stolar's "Saturn is not our future" remark. Anyways, because this version is Japanese, it includes Norimaro, who was stripped out of all the international releases. He's a character that was created by a Japanese comedian and is basically just a send-up of the super nerdy fanboy otaku. He's fun enough, but it's honestly not a huge loss that we didn't see him. He's a novelty character, and the Shoryuken Wiki lists him alone in the garbage tier. We're not done yet, though. There are more characters beyond the playable roster you see initially. Some characters were removed from the previous game, X-Men vs. Street Fighter, including some that were new for that game, like Sabretooth and Gambit. And while most of them are truly gone, Charlie manages to make a return, albeit in a slightly altered form. This game marks the first appearance of Shadow as a hidden character, as well as Dark Sakura and Mech Zangief. This game is also the only true appearance of Cyber Akuma, aka Mech Goki, who serves as final boss. The penultimate boss is Apocalypse, returning from the prior entry, and he's now made Akuma even more powerful. While there was a cyber costume for Akuma in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, it's just cosmetic, and doesn't actually feature any of the special attacks or ridiculous overpoweredness that he has here. There are a handful of other hidden characters as well, but they're mostly just palette swaps of Marvel heroes with adjusted stats. As for the gameplay, well, this game is the direct predecessor to Marvel vs. Capcom, so you probably have a good idea of what to expect if you've played any game in the series. You choose 2 characters and face other teams of 2 in your quest to defeat Apocalypse and Cyber Akuma. While playing, you can tag out by hitting both strong attack buttons, and this allows your partner to gain back some of their health. Both medium attacks bring in your partner for an assist, and you can do stuff like Team Supers. As is typical of games in this series, the stages are not tied to particular characters like the stages in Street Fighter, but I do like them more than the stages in, say, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. One stage carries forward the breakable floor gimmick from earlier Marvel fighting games. Now, overall, keeping in line with Capcom's work of the time, they look great. But there is one tiny problem. They're mostly minor updates of stages from X-Men vs. Street Fighter. And that was the problem this game faced when it was released. Critics largely regarded it as too similar to its direct predecessor, as if that was something new for Capcom. In his GameSpot review, Jeff Gersman even said it was a near-carbon copy, but he still recommended the Saturn version as an import over our next game, Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter on the original PlayStation. This game was actually released as Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter EX in Japan, in some vain attempt to convince players that it was an improved version of the arcade and Saturn editions. I'm almost positive no one was fooled. If you've seen me talk about Marvel vs. Capcom on the PS1, then you probably won't be shocked. If not, well, get ready for the first bombshell. This game doesn't have tag fighting. Crazy, right? That's kind of the whole gimmick? But no, the PS1 couldn't handle the sprite work necessary. In fact, half the player sprites on the screen at any given time in this version are flat polygons using sprite art as textures. You can see it using an emulator, because emulator settings can be made to put filters on polygons, but not sprites. Check it out. And it's because of this that the game fundamentally changes into a kinda sorta one-on-one fighter, but not completely because you still pick 2 characters. You still use assists. You can even still do crossover super moves, but you can't tag out. Each fight requires 2 knockouts, but when you score one, you don't recover all your health as is typical of the genre. Here, just the red part of your health bar that would normally come back gradually when your character is tagged out is what comes back. And look, it's not a bad one-on-one fighter. It's fine, all things considered, but it's not the game you played in the arcade. It's not the game you could get on the Saturn. It's missing what's arguably the defining feature. And like Marvel vs. Capcom after it, it would approximate the tag battles with a special crossover mode. This mode lets you and your opponent each choose one character, and your tag team is made up of yours and theirs. It's not a terrible consolation, but while MVC limits it to one-off fights like a versus mode, this game tries to make a full single-player experience out of it. But there's one big problem. The character you keep is the one who scored the knockout, not the one you originally picked necessarily. So, hypothetically, within 2 fights, you could have a completely different team than the one you started with. The game also includes a mode called Hero Battle, But all that does is make you choose either Marvel superheroes or Street Fighter, and then see if you can beat all of the characters on the other side before losing everyone on yours. Oh, and like Marvel vs. Capcom after it, it adds a beginner setting when starting a match, which, again, is a fine accessibility option, but it's hardly a selling point. None of this makes up for the lack of true tag fighting. To its credit, the PS1 game has all the fighters, including the hidden ones, and while the footage you're seeing doesn't have Norimaro, that's because, again, my copy is the North American version. The Japanese one does have him. It also has all the stages and all the music, near as I can tell, so they made an effort. But it's still missing frames of animation, and Uatu as my witness, these load times are simply interminable. Let's compare.
Freedom prevails! Thumbs up, soldier! Ready, fight!
Hey, while we're here, let's just go ahead and do like we always do. Take a look and a listen, side by side.
Ready, fight! Final justice! Victory! Crossover combination finish! Freedom prevails!
The PS1 game doesn't look terrible, but it's missing frames of animation from both the characters and the backgrounds. And audio-wise, I'm not sure if the sound effects and voices were just at a lower sample rate or turned way down in the mix or what, but the stuff that isn't music sounds wonky. That makes it time to give the edge. Last time I did this, it was PS1 versus Dreamcast, which made the outcome a little obvious. I was kind of hoping it might be more interesting this time around, but no. The Saturn version is, to my eyes, arcade perfect, even though I am a filthy casual when it comes to fighting games. Sure, it lacks the extra modes, but it doesn't need them. It mops the floor with the PS1 version. Fortunately for all of us, the Saturn version is currently sitting at about half the price of the North American PS1 version, and importing on Saturn is super easy. And that does it for me for this episode, but be sure to come back next month because I will be looking at another comic book game. Well, sort of. You see, it's an important anniversary for a team that got started in comics, but really made their mark in cartoons. Hope to see you then. Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching, and I gotta do that thing everyone here does. Please like, subscribe, comment, ring the stupid bell, all the good stuff. If you really dig the show, consider helping me out on Patreon. The show is ad-free thanks to viewers like you helping out, and you can get your name listed here with these fine people, as well as access to a patron-only monthly stream. If you want more of the Capcom Marvel pairing, the video on the left is on Marvel vs. Capcom, and the video on the right is on The Punisher.